Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I want to talk about maintaining your aquariums while you are away on vacation or a business trip. In the last month I have had to do both, and I want to share some of my experiences and how the tanks fared, what I did in preparation leading up to my trip, and some lessons learned after this trip. Before I get into how the tanks did though, I want to explain how long I was gone. So the month of January was kind of crazy for me. I was home for part of it, but the majority of it I was out of town. Went on a cruise for 8 days and came home for a day and a half and had to turn around and leave on a 12-day business trip. That's the longest I've really had to leave the tanks alone before. And that first week, nobody was going to really be home other than a dog sitter. My wife was with me, of course, and then on my business trip, my wife was going to be taking care of the aquariums. I know the big question everyone's going to be asking is, how did your aquariums fare being away for that long? And I gotta say, they did pretty darn well. To start off, I'll talk about the 720-gallon aquarium. All the fish are doing great. No issues in this tank whatsoever. And I was a little concerned just for the length of time I was going to be gone and some changes that were made to the feeding regimen while I was gone. Moving on to the 480-gallon tank, a little bit more happened over here. There were a couple of coral frags that got knocked over by sea urchins. Not a big deal. I did notice about a week after I had been home that 2 royal grommas and an algae blenny are missing, which I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but the rest of the fish in the 480 and the 720-gallon are all looking good, so no issues there. Overall, I'm going to say the aquarium system was just fine while I was gone. Now, leading into going on this trip, there was quite a bit in the way of preparation. And I knew about my vacation and my business trip several months in advance, which is something that you should always leverage as an advantage if you're going to be traveling. You know, take that time to really think about what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be going, and how are your aquariums going to be cared for while you are out of town. In my case, I had a couple of different situations pop up, and I needed to be prepared for both. Now, the first 8 days while I was on my cruise was probably the most stressful time because I was releasing all the control of the house, the care of my dogs, and the care of my aquarium in others' hands. And I was going to be out of the country and would not get phone service in a lot of the places I was at, especially out in the middle of the ocean on a cruise ship. So, needless to say, there was a little more stress behind me. But I did everything in my power to try and alleviate that stress before going. To start off, I wanted stability in this system before I left. The best thing I could say I did for that was to stop adding fish to the tank. I've made this mistake in the past, adding fish too close to a trip and regretting it later on. So I stopped adding fish about a month and a half to a month before I left. That way there was no possibility of aggression issues or hopefully any disease issues popping up from new fish coming into the system. I should have probably held off a little bit more on buying new corals, but there was a cherry corals live sale right after the first of the year, and I just couldn't help myself, and I needed to get some coral from them because they got such nice stuff. So I picked up about 20 pieces of coral, and I got that a day and a half before I left on my trip. Probably not the best of ideas, just having that much new stuff come into the tank, but everything fared really well while I was gone, other than a couple of corals getting knocked off their frag plugs. One other thing with preparation on this system before I left was the fact that not just not adding livestock was being one of the pieces there, but not making any major changes to equipment, to dosing. I kept everything kind of the same. I didn't do any major pump maintenance or anything like that. I want to leave all the equipment up and running as it's been for a while, so that I wasn't touching it or messing with it, because it's just something that can lead to more problems. If it's all working good, just leave it alone and let it be. And that's another important piece of preparation. Another thing I made sure that I had in prep was my emergency aquarium kit that has the battery operated air pumps, a big carbon metal pad in it, just so that that's on hand. Printed out instructions with people that could be called in case of emergency. The dog sitter that was staying at the house knows nothing of aquariums or how they work, and had some real basic instructions of please go downstairs and look at the tank a couple times a day or more if you feel you want to. If you see water on the floor or you see a bunch of things that you think are dead, here are the numbers to call. I also hired my local fish store, Reef Plus, to come by every 2 days to feed frozen food to the fish and also to just do a general system check of everything. Make sure that everything's operating good and there's no issues going on in the tanks. I also portioned out the frozen food, so when Steve from Reef Plus came over, all he had to do was grab a baggie with an L for the big tank and an S for the small tank and feed the food. I took care of dry pellet foods and set up some Eheim automatic feeders. I think they're a great little auto feeder. I had them running about a month before I went on my trip to make sure that they actually are working. With that in place, written instructions, the emergency kit out, I also sent Steve from Reef Plus some pictures of critical systems on the tank, where the freezer was, the food. For the calcium reactor drip rate, I made a short 10-second video and messaged that to him so that he could see the actual drip rate that I desire on the calcium reactor while I was gone. So if it needs adjustment, it was an easy point of reference. Also pictures of the valves that should be turned. So just some basic things. And of course we did have a discussion too of, well, what if something catastrophic happens? And more or less I said, I can't do anything about it. If something major happens, do what you think is in your best judgment to try and save the animals. And as far as preparation, there was also instructions to hook up emergency generator if needed, a spare propane tank that was filled before I left. So there was a lot of things, just emergency supplies on hand, so if something happened, they could be deployed quickly without the hassle of, oh, well, this is what you're supposed to do, but sorry, you don't have the supplies you need. I tried to eliminate all of that and make it as simple for Steve from Reef Plus and also for our dog sitter, so that something happened, it was just call these people. And the other thing I also did was not only tell them to call, but make sure they leave a voicemail, make sure they send text messages to, kind of push the urgency of what's happening. And with that prep, the first 8 days went really well. Now, coming back for a day and a half, I had to just prep my wife, which essentially was, here's the frozen food to feed every day, the automatic feeders got topped off, and here's the calcium reactor drip rate. Pretty simple, standard, straightforward for her to take care of everything. She knows the systems a little better, knows the fish well, and the corals well, so if she saw anything out of place or not looking right, she would probably give me a call and let me know. And that kind of leads into some of the lessons learned that I have coming out of this trip. Now, there were only a couple of minor issues while I was gone that as I said, the tanks fared really well. When I was actually on my cruise, I had gone ahead and checked my Apex and noticed I started getting a bunch of emails for my ATK stating that it was in alarm. So I checked my Apex and noticed that it was just off, and that happens every now and then with my ATK where it just runs for an excessive amount of time, it hits its limit and it shuts off and turns itself off as a safety precaution. So I cycled it through 3 times. I made sure I didn't have a high level alarm as well, and that was all clear. So after 3 iterations of running it, the auto top off re-engaged and was fine the rest of the trip. One thing that did happen a few times was the calcium reactor usually gets adjusted every few days, just the way the drip rate is, and the little pressure pump that was operating it, required the needle valve to be adjusted every 3 days or so. The calcium reactor pH level, though, I did notice had gotten down to a pretty low level, low enough to where it would have shut the gas off within a few more hundredths of pH change. So that was something I did call Steve from Reef Plus and just said, hey, you get down, please go check the calcium reactor. It just needs to the drip rate increased. It slowed down quite a bit. Then he took care of that, and he had to do that a couple of times while I was gone, which again, not a big deal. Didn't hurt anything. While I was out on my business trip, my wife also had to do that several times. And one thing I will tell everybody out there, if you have to work with your spouse, a family member, or whoever, while you're out of town, you're in phone coverage, and you want to be able to see how the tanks are really doing while you're out of town, is start a video call. And that way you could say, hey, point the phone at this, or turn the camera on the phone towards whatever it is, like the calcium reactor drip rate. My wife wanted a little assistance with that, so I was able to look at it and say, yes, that's correct, or no, it's not. And it made adjustments real easy and took care of any questions that she had. And because I was gone for that 12-day stint, I also needed to make more RODI water, as I only leave about 40 gallons of water or so available at any one time, just so that if the pump fails on, it can't overflow the system with fresh water. And just guiding her through making the RODI water was pretty simple. It's automatic, and once the RODI system's up and running, it will go ahead and cut itself off with a float pressure switch once it reaches the maximum. After that, she just had to turn the water off on the unit, and it was good. So that kind of leads into the other lessons learned. Was really that calcium reactor seemed to be my biggest pain point while I was gone. Because the calcium reactor was giving me such a bit of problems with just needing more attention, I decided that it was time to make a change, so that if I have to go out of town for vacation or business trips, I'm going to have a little bit more peace of mind with just letting the calcium reactor be running without having to worry about that needle valve needing a constant adjustment. And I saw some videos on Bulk Reef Supply. I also saw that Rico's Aquariums put on one of these Kimura continuous duty pumps. And because this peristaltic pump is rated for continuous duty, it's something that could actually be purposely used for a calcium reactor. I thought about using other peristaltic pumps. What I really didn't like with a lot of them is that they're not continuous duty rated, which means you're going to burn out motors and parts a lot quicker. And the medical grade ones that are continuous duty rated are very expensive, very bulky, and very loud. So I saw this little guy come along. I decided this was something I wanted to try. There's a few other folks out there. Like I said, I saw some videos on YouTube with it, and I thought this would be a great thing to try out on my calcium reactor. So it's now set up, and it's pulling water through the calcium reactor. It's been running for a couple of weeks now, and I haven't had any issues. And one thing I've noticed is that kind of the swing of the pH inside the calcium reactor is all but gone now, and it's pretty much just rock solid all the time. So that's something I'm really happy to see with this. So that's one of the biggest things that I decided to do now that I've kind of had some lessons learned on this long trip. So beyond the calcium reactor piece, really it just came down to taking the time and preparation with this system before I left. I really don't have any of the lessons learned. I felt this was a really good trip. I used to really dread going on vacations with aquariums because it used to almost be kind of a game I'd have to play with myself to say, change whatever your favorite animal or plant or coral is in your tank for a couple of weeks before you go, because usually that's the thing that's going to end up dying while you're away from home. Happy to say that did not happen in this case, and I feel a whole lot better the next time I go on vacation. And also having the Apex Fusion gave me great peace of mind while I was out of town. While I don't allow it to control everything in my system, it does give me a good snapshot picture of what is going on when I'm out of town. So if I see something going on, I can make a phone call. I knew my calcium reactor was needing adjustment because of the pH probe readout in the Apex. So it was a really nice thing to see there. Also getting those email alerts. And that's really what I want to talk about. So I hope this video helps anyone out that's going to be traveling either for vacation or business. Of course, if you got questions about anything specific in this video, please go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. If you like today's video, go ahead, give me that thumbs up, let me know you like the content. And as always, if you want to see more about my aquarium systems and my journey through this hobby, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.